Hello, scholars. This is your UMS Literacy Unit 3 assessment. As you are reading the text, please make sure you are annotating. Part 1. Read the passages and answer the questions that follow. The Uncomfortable Bed by Guy de Maupassant. One autumn, I went to stay for the hunting season with some friends in a castle in Picardy. My friends were fond of practical joking, as all my friends are. I do not care to know any other sort of people. When I arrived, they gave me a princely reception, which at once aroused distrust in my mind. We had some capital shooting. They embraced me. They teased me, as if they expected to have great fun at my expense. I said to myself, "Look out, old ferret. They have something in preparation for you." During the dinner, the laughter was excessive, far too great in fact. I thought, here are people who take a double share of amusement, and apparently without reason. They must be looking out in their own minds for some good bit of fun. Assuredly, I am to be the victim of the joke. Attention! During the entire evening, everyone laughed in an exaggerated fashion. I smelled a practical joke in the air, as a dog smells game. But what was it? I was watchful, restless. I did not let a word or meaning or gesture escape me. Everyone seemed to me an object of suspicion. I even looked distrustfully at the faces of the servants. The hour rang for going to bed, and the whole household came to escort me to my room. Why? They called to me. "Good night." I entered the apartment, shut the door, and remained standing, without moving a single step, holding the wax candle in my hand. I heard laughter and whispering in the corridor. Without doubt, they were spying on me. I cast a glance around the walls, the furniture, the ceiling, the hangings, the floor. I saw nothing to justify suspicion. I heard persons moving about outside my door. I had no doubt they were looking through the keyhole. An idea came into my head. My candle may suddenly go out and leave me in darkness. Then I went across to the mantelpiece and lighted all the wax candles that were on it. After that, I cast another glance around me without discovering anything. I advanced with short steps carefully, examining the apartment. Nothing I inspected, every article, one after the other. Still nothing. I went over to the window. The shutters, large wooden shutters, were open. I shut them with great care, and then drew the curtains, enormous velvet curtains, and I placed a chair in front of them, so as to have nothing to fear from without. Then I cautiously sat down. The armchair was solid. I did not venture to get into the bed. However, time was flying, and I ended by coming to the conclusion that I was ridiculous. If they were spying on me, as I supposed, they must, while waiting for the success of the joke they had been preparing for me, have been laughing enormously at my terror. So I made up my mind to go to bed. But the bed was particularly suspicious looking. I pulled at the curtains. They seemed to be secure. All the same, there was danger. I was going perhaps to receive a cold shower bath from overhead, or perhaps the moment I stretched myself out to find myself sinking under the floor with my mattress. I searched in my memory for all the practical jokes of which I ever had experienced, and I did not want to be caught. Certainly not, certainly not. Then I suddenly thought of a precaution which I considered one of extreme effectiveness. I caught hold of the side of the mattress gingerly, and very slowly drew it toward me. It came away, followed by the sheet and the rest of the bedclothes. I dragged all these objects into the very middle of the room, facing the entrance door. I made my bed over again, as best as I could, some distance from the suspected bed frame, in the corner which had filled me with such anxiety. Then I extinguished all the candles, and groping my way, I slipped under the bedclothes. For at least an hour I remained awake, starting at the slightest sound. Everything seemed quiet in the chateau. I fell asleep. I must have been in a deep sleep for a long time, but all of a sudden I was awakened with a start by the fall of a heavy body tumbling right on top of my own body, and at the same time I received on my face, on my neck, and on my chest a burning liquid, which made me utter a howl of pain, and a dreadful noise, as if a sideboard laden with plates and dishes had fallen down, penetrated my ears. I felt myself suffocating under the weight that was crushing me and preventing me from moving. I stretched out my hand to find out what was the nature of this object. I felt a face, a nose, and whiskers. Then, with all my strength, I launched out a blow over his face. I immediately received a hail of slaps, which made me jump straight out of the soaked sheets and rush in my nightshirt to the corridor, the door of which I found open. Oh, stupor! It was a broad daylight. The noise brought my friends hurrying into the apartment, and we found sprawling over my improvised bed the dismayed butler, who, while bringing me my morning cup of tea, had tripped over this obstacle in the middle of the floor and fallen on his stomach, spilling, in spite of himself, my breakfast over my face. The precautions I had taken in closing the shutters and going to sleep in the middle of the room had only brought about the interlude I had been striving to avoid. Ah, how they laughed all day. Number 1. Which of these best expresses a theme of the story? A. Friends are not always to be trusted. B. Too much worry in the face of unknown obstacles leads to needless stress. C. Things are not always as they seem. D. At times, our biggest problems are ones we create for ourselves. Number 2. Which line best reveals the central conflict of the story? A. My friends are fond of practical joking, as all my friends are. B. I felt myself suffocating under the weight that was crushing me and preventing me from moving. C. Look out, old ferret. They have something in preparation for you. D. Here are people who take a double share of amusement, and apparently without reason, they must be looking out in their own minds for some good bit of fun. Number 3. The narrator is best described as A. Suspicious and exciting. B. Watchful and anxious. C. Careless and apprehensive. Or D. Unthinking and bewildered. Number 4. Select the detail that best supports your answer to question 3. A. The precautions I had taken in closing the shutters and going to sleep in the middle of the room had only brought about the interlude I had been striving to avoid. B. For at least another hour I remained awake, starting at the slightest sound. C. Without doubt, they were spying on me. Or D. I smelled a practical joke in the air, as a dog smells game. Number 5. What is most likely the meaning of the word gingerly as used in paragraph 11? A. In a firm way. B. With caution. C. Quickly with speed. Or D. Without a pause. Number 6. How does the author use internal monologue to develop the plot? Support your answer with evidence from the text. The next question. What is the purpose of the imagery in paragraphs 13 and 14? Support your answer with evidence from the text. Now we are going to read the next story. The Bully by Roger Dean Kaiser. I walked into the Huddle House restaurant in Brunswick, Georgia, and sat down at the counter as all of the booths were taken. I picked up a menu and began to look at the various items, trying to decide if I wanted to order breakfast or just go ahead and eat lunch. "Excuse me," someone said as they touched me on the shoulder. I looked up and turned to the side to see a rather nice-looking woman standing before me. "Is your name Roger by any chance?" she asked me. "Yes," I responded, looking rather confused as I'd never seen this woman before. "My name is Barbara, and my husband is Tony," she said, pointing to a distant table near the door leading into the bathrooms. I looked in the direction that she was pointing, but I did not recognize the man who was sitting alone at the table. "I'm sorry, I'm confused. I don't think that I know you guys, but my name is Roger. Roger Kaiser," I told her. "Tony Claxon. Tony from Landon High School in Jacksonville, Florida," she asked me. I'm really sorry. The name doesn't ring a bell, I said. She turned and walked back to her table and sat down. She and her husband immediately began talking, and once in a while I could see her turn around in her seat and look directly at me. I finally decided to order breakfast and a cup of decaffeinated coffee. I sat there continually raking my brain, trying to remember who this Tony guy was. I must know him, I thought to myself. He recognizes me for some reason. I picked up my coffee and took a sip. All of a sudden, it came to me like a flash of lightning. Tony! Tony the Bull! I mumbled as I swung myself around on my stool and faced his direction. The bully of my 7th grade geography class, I thought. How many times that sorry guy made fun of my big ears in front of the girls in my class. How many times this sorry son of a gun had laughed at me because I had no parents and had to live in an orphanage. How many times this big bully slammed me up against the lockers in the hallway just to make himself look like a big man to all the other students. He raised his hand and waved at me. I smiled, returned the wave, and turned back around and began to eat my breakfast. Jesus, he's so thin now. Not the big burly guy that I remember back in 1957, I thought to myself. All of a sudden, I heard the sound of dishes breaking, so I spun around to see what had happened. Tony had accidentally hit several plates, knocking them off the table, and he was trying to get into his wheelchair, which had been parked in the bathroom hallway while they were eating. The waitress ran over and started picking up the broken dishes, and I listened as Tony and his wife tried to apologize. As Tony rolled by me, being pushed by his wife, I looked up and smiled. Roger, he said, as he nodded his head forward. Tony, I responded as I nodded my head in return. I watched as he went out of the door and slowly made their way to a large van which had a wheelchair loader located in the side door of the vehicle. I sat and watched as his wife tried over and over to get the ramp to come down, but it just would not work. Finally, I got up, paid for my meal, and walked up to the van. What's the problem? I asked. Darn thing sticks once in a while, said Tony. Could you help me get him in the van? Asked his wife. I think I can do that, I said as I grabbed the wheelchair and rolled Tony over the passenger door. I opened the door and locked the brakes on the wheelchair. Okay, arms around the neck, dude, I said as I reached down and grabbed him around the waist and carefully raised him up to the passenger seat of the van. As Tony let go of my neck, I reached over and swung his limp, lifeless legs, one at a time, into the van, so that they would be stationed directly in front of him. You remember, don't you? He said, looking directly into my eyes. I remember, Tony, I said. I guess you're thinking what goes around comes around, he said softly. I would never think like that, Tony, I said with a stern look on my face. He reached over and grabbed both of my hands and squeezed them tightly. Is how I feel in this wheelchair how you felt way back then when you lived in the orphan home? He asked me. Almost, Tony. You're very lucky. You have someone to push you around who loves you. I didn't have anyone, I responded. I reached in my pocket and pulled out one of my cards that had my home telephone number written on it and handed it to him. Give me a call sometime. We'll do lunch, I told him. We both laughed. I stood there watching as they drove toward the interstate and finally disappeared onto the southbound ramp. Number 7. Which lines best represents the central conflict of the bully? A. Almost, Tony. You are very lucky. You have someone to push you around who loves you. I didn't have anyone, I responded. B. I remember, Tony, I said. I guess you're thinking what goes around comes around, he said softly. C. Tony! Tony the Bull, I mumbled. D. I looked in the direction that she was pointing, but did not recognize the man who was sitting alone at the table. Number 8. What is the purpose of paragraph 16? A. It introduces the character of Tony as a teenager. B. It illustrates important background information. C. Characterizes Roger as quick to hold a grudge. Or D. It allows the reader to predict what will happen next. Number 9. What is the most likely reason the author includes the word finally in paragraph 23? To demonstrate that Roger is slowly eating his food. B. To illustrate that Roger does not want to help Tony. C. To emphasize that Roger makes a conscious choice to go and assist the man who bullied him. Or D. To underscore how long it takes Tony's wife to operate the van. Number 10. What is the best word to describe Roger in the last paragraph of the passage? A. Reflective. B. Forgiving. C. Uncaring. Or D. Dismissive. What is the theme of the bully? Support your answer with evidence from the text. Part 2. Show your teacher your completed independent reading log.